Hi, my name is Sarah Heffner, and I'm an environmental scientist with the California Department of Water Resources. I'm sorry I can't be here in person, but like many others, I was concerned about the COVID situation and travel. Today, I will be talking about my research on a 53-year-old collection from the Chinese site of Wayrica. In the winter of 1969, archaeologists with the Department of Beaches and Parks, now the California Department of Parks and Recreation, were contracted by Caltrans to conduct salvage excavations at Wayrica's third Chinatown, prior to its destruction by the construction of I-5. They were aided by local volunteers. From Sac State University and Chico State University. This was one of the earliest excavations of a Chinese community in California and represents a very early collaborative effort between state parks and Caltrans. Archaeologists excavated 73 units and 2 trenches, recorded 9 features, and recovered more than 13,000 artifacts. The artifacts from the collection are currently housed at the State Archaeological Collections and Research Facility in McClellan, California. I began researching the Wayrica collection in 2016, with my primary goal being publishing an unfinished draft archaeological report and sharing the results of this 53-year-old excavation with the professional archaeological community and the public. The Wayrica excavation took place shortly after the second annual meeting of the SHA in January 1969, where archaeologists Paul Chase and Chris Evans discussed their research on a Chinese railroad worker camp at Donner Summit, which led to the formation of SHA's Overseas Chinese Research Group. The term Overseas Chinese Archaeology was coined by Chase and Evans and used to describe an artifact horizon associated with sites occupied by Chinese immigrants, including Canton-style ceramics, opium pipe bowls, cooking pans, and brown glazed stoneware storage vessels. Following Chase and Evans' early work, interest in excavating Chinese immigrant sites increased. Examples of this work include Lang and Walter's study of Chinese subsistence and consumer practices at the Lower China Store in Hidden Valley, Greenwood's excavation of a refuse pit containing nearly all artifacts of Chinese origin for the Mission San Buenaventura project, and the excavation of a large 19th century deposit along the San Francisco waterfront in 1978. Much of this early work focus on the identification and classification of Chinese material culture. Analysis of the Wayrica artifacts began in 1978, almost a decade following the excavation, when State Parks was trying to build their collections, and money had become available through federal Title II's funding to analyze and catalog the collection. The researchers' analysis reflects the late 1970s trend in overseas Chinese archaeology on the identification and classification of artifacts of Chinese manufacture. This included organizing Chinese ceramics by shape, pattern, glaze type, wear type, and identifying maker's marks, and conducting detailed studies of coins, Chinese medicine vials, and opium pipe bowls. In addition to the over 13,000 artifacts from the excavation, SACRIF houses all the documents associated with the original excavation and later research efforts, including site photos, site records and notes, lab forms, and maps showing artifact distributions. Most of this information is stored in archival boxes, although there are some larger field maps and several black and white excavation photos stored elsewhere in the facility. When I began researching the collection, none of these materials were available electronically, and they're only partially organized. I wanted to pull together all this information to assist me in finalizing the draft archaeological report and to make it available to future researchers. I scanned all the materials in each box and compiled them as PDFs, named them and organized them by archival box number. I created an Excel catalog of the archival boxes, and you can see I have the box number. It's the format or location of each item within the box, for example, red folder, or it's loose in the box, the item name or description, the contents of the item, and then whether or not the item was scanned. Some items were not scanned because they were either duplicates, draft versions of the report, or they just weren't relevant to the report. Additionally, another challenge I faced was various versions of the catalog and information not making it into the final catalog. The catalog, the artifacts were first cataloged in the field lab, done by hand here. They were later typed up, and then in 1993, they were entered into an early computerized collections program called Argus. They were later re-entered into the current system called the Museum System cataloging program in 2002 and 2003. Although some of these earlier catalogs contain a lot of detail about each artifact, such as measurements, embossing, maker's marks, etc., a lot of this information was lost in the various transitions from handwritten to type to electronic catalog. By scanning all these archival materials, I have been slowly able to add this information back into the current catalog. This is an Excel spreadsheet that I've been working on, and this is what I sent as part of finishing up the project for state parks. As you can see, there's definitely more information that needs to be added, but it is a very long process. So I sent this to state parks, and they'll be updating it in their museum system program. Some other challenges I dealt with were data deficiencies. The excavation was very much a large salvage excavation, with the goal being to recover as much material as possible associated with the former Chinese community of Wayrica prior to it being raided by Caltrans. For I-5, two large areas A and B were excavated and were situated in what was thought to have been the area that once last housed the standing buildings of Chinatown, as first depicted on a 1927 Sanborn map. In total, the excavation area covered an area of 60,000 square feet. Units were very large, ranging in size from 5 to 10 feet or 15 by 15 feet, with trenches measuring 150 by 50 feet and 150 by 10 feet. When the collection was reanalyzed in the late 1970s, researchers attempted to correlate features in units with the 1927 Sanborn map. However, this was difficult due to large scale of the excavation, lack of stratigraphic control, and unclear information on where exactly areas A and B were situated in relationship to roads and features. With the help of a graphics designer and ArcGIS specialist, sorry, I forgot to show these. Here we go. The original excavation maps were overlaid on top of Caltrans as-built for the Wayrica I-5 project, historical aerials, and the 1927 Sanborn map. This was useful for interpreting site layout and use area. So here we have the as-built plans showing I-5 coming through, the excavation maps, and then this is the outline of the Sanborn map. And then here's another overlay. This is a historical aerial from 1955. These are the excavation maps, Sanborn map here, and this is a row of locust trees that are, you can see on the photo here, and that they were still there when they did the excavation, so they sort of drew them in. Only complete or identifiable artifacts were collected from an excavation, and very few units were screened. No faunal floor materials were collected, and materials were processed and cataloged on site. In order to help fill in the gaps of missing information or other artifact details in the collection, I used a variety of different techniques to better understand the spatial distribution of artifacts across the site and to identify particular use areas or business locations. Functional categories were assigned to all catalog entries and were primarily based on categories outlined in thematic studies prepared by Caltrans on townsite properties, agricultural properties, and mining properties, which represent a blend of Stanley South's 1977 functional categories and Rick Sprague's classification system. Comparative research and other Chinese artifact collections, such as Woodland Opera House, San Jose Chinatown, and Jacksonville, Oregon Chinese quarters, aided in the identification and interpretation of the Wayrica artifacts. Several medicine and household bottles with trace bits of residue were sent to the University of Idaho's chemistry department for residue analysis. This information provided useful for understanding the uses and contents of these bottles. Chinese characters on ceramics and medicine bottles were translated. All this information was incorporated into an updated version of the artifact catalog. Artifacts associated with food storage and food preparation and consumption, combined with an understanding of historic Chinese culinary practices, help shed light on what the occupants of Wayrica's Chinese community were eating and how they were preparing their food. I have been conducting research on the collection since 2016, and this research has culminated in the publication of a volume 36 of the California State Parks Publications and Cultural Heritage series, which focuses on the history of Wayrica's Chinese community and the results of the 1969 salvage excavation. While working with this collection proved challenging, I think it was very worthwhile. I was able to get several publications and presentations out of my collections research, and there's definitely much more research that can be done. In the future, I would like to develop an online exhibit featuring photographs of unique artifacts from the collection to allow individuals to view and enjoy the collection remotely. The Wayrica Chinatown collection is one of 3 collections located at Sackriff, containing materials from excavations of Chinese communities in the state of California. The other 2 are from the Winland Opera House site and China Camp Village in San Rafael. All 3 collections contain a rich array of materials that, through additional research and laboratory analysis, can contribute to the telling of the story of the Chinese experience in California. When it is safe to do so, I highly encourage you to visit Sackriff and view these collections. Thank you very much.